In today's Mishnah, we'll learn the fourth and fifth Mishnah from the third parak of Masechta Kinim. Now, for the remaining Mishnah in this Masechta, the Mefarshim have very different understandings on the Mishnah. For simplicity, we're going to only explain the Mishnah according to one parish, and I'll say which parish we're going according to before I explain it. However, if you're interested to learn the Mishnah in more detail, you can access the book, the Mishnah, the Kuntras we produced on Masechta Kinim, either on the website. You can see the link below below the video, and in the book, in the Sefer, we produced peak diagrams for all the different commentaries, all the different opinions in terms of how to understand the Mishnah. However, let's learn this Mishnah now. This is the Mishnah Dalet, and we're going to go according to the opinion of Rashi, which is also explanation of Rosh, Bartanur, and Tiferet Israel. So the Mishnah begins: Chatat ve'olah ustuma muforeshet. So we're dealing with a chatat, a sin offering, an olah. Well, that's a fully burnt offering. A ken stuma, a pair of birds that has not yet been designated which is a chatat and which is a olah, and a ken meforeshet, so a pair of birds that was purchased, and we know which is a chatat and which is a olah, was designated at the time of purchase. So to understand this Mishnah, let's use the example of Rachel and Leah again. Rachel had to bring two sin offerings, two chatat and one olah, and Leah had to bring one chatat and two olot. So what happened is, Rachel and Leah decided to purchase some birds together. So Rachel purchased one bird, and she designated that as being a chatat. Leah purchased another, and she said it should be an olah. Because again, Rachel had one excess of Leah, and Leah in terms of chataot, and Leah had one bird she required as an olah in excess of Rachel. Then what they did is they purchased two other kinim. One is a ken stuma, and one is a ken meforeshet. So one, as we said, where the bird was already designated, which is a chatat and which is olah, and one that was not. Then they handed these three pairs of birds together as follows. So if we look at the diagram, the first ken, we'll call it ken A, as we show in the diagram. That was a pair of birds that had Rachel's chatat and Leah's olah. Then they also had two other kinim, ken B and ken C. B was our ken meforeshet, and ken C is our ken stuma. And the ownership in terms of who these birds are going to be offered for has not yet been specified. So in other words, they'll purchase together. The Kohen was going to decide. Mishnah then says, Asa kulam lamala mechetza kasher mechetza pasul, kulam lamata mechetza kasher mechetza pasul. If they're all offered above or all offered below, then in sense, again, all these birds, half have to be offered as chatot and half has to be offered as olot. In both situations, half would be valid and half would be invalid. And that really follows on from what we've been discussing the last few days. What happens, however, if chetzion lamala v'chetzion lamata? If half were offered above and half were offered below? And then Mishnah says, in kasher ela stuma. Then the only ken that is valid is the ken stuma. So to understand this Mishnah, the Mefarshim explained that the Kohen was handed the birds in their pairs. Ken A, Ken B, Ken C, as we said above. And they were offered distinctly. I mean, Ken A was offered one above, one below. Ken B was offered one above, one below. And Ken C was offered one above, one below. Now, since Ken C, the third ken, was a ken stuma, that's going to be the ken that's going to be valid. Because again, either of those birds can be offered above or below, as long as one is offered above and the other is offered below. However, the other two kinim, the Kohen didn't ask which is a ken, which is a chatat, and which is olah. He just assumed that they're both all kinei stuma. So therefore, as we show in the diagram, we have to be concerned that the chatat from both ken A and B were offered above, and the olah from both ken A and B were offered below. So therefore, we have to assume that ken A and B are considered invalid, and ken C is considered valid. However, the Mishnah says, V'hi mitchaleket benehem, meaning the fact that the ken stuma is invalid will be divided between them. Now, what's this mean? Rachel and Leah, for sure, when you consider ken A, have to bring their replacement korbanot. Rachel has to bring a chatat, and Leah has to bring a olah. However, the fact that ken C is considered valid, and ken B, the chatat and olah, invalid, we don't make assumptions in terms of who they belong to. In terms of, we don't simply say that Leah got all the valid ones and Rachel got all the invalid ones. We also don't make assumptions in terms of which bird is going to be considered Rachel's valid one and Leah's invalid one. Like, we don't simply assume that since Rachel brought a chatat, we can say in ken B, the olah was considered her valid bird. Therefore, what we have to do is the pair of birds to replace ken B, our original ken meforeshet, is brought and it's stipulated, meaning they bring it al t'nai. And we say that if if Rachel required the chatat at this situation, then the chatat is being offered for her. Otherwise, it's offered. Otherwise, it'd be offered for Leah. And similarly, we do the reverse for the remaining olah. There are a number of difficulties raised on this explanation, but I'll leave that matter for you and for the study, as well as exploring other explanations on this Mishnah. Let's now learn Mishnah Hey. Now, this is the fifth Mishnah, and we're going to explain this according to the Ravid and Rosh. The Mishnah begins as follows: Chatat shinit arva bechova. If you have a chatat that is mixed up with a chova, that's a ken stuma, in kasher, what number of birds are valid? Ela minyan chatat shebechova. Only the number of chataot is equal to the number of chataot that would have been brought with the ken stuma. And this principle we already explained back in the first perek and the second Mishnah we learned together regarding a chatat that is mixed up with a ken stuma. However, as we've explained that in the previous prakim, that's where the Kohen first went to the Beit Din and asked what to do. However, as we'll see in this case, in this Mishnah, if the Kohen didn't ask what to do, that rule doesn't necessarily hold true in all cases. So the Mishnah explains, Chova shnaim bechatat. The way that Ravid and Rosh explain this Mishnah is the number of birds brought as the Chova, meaning not just the kinei stuma is double, but the number of birds in the Chova. So using an example, we have 4 birds that have been brought part of this ken stuma, where shnaim would double the number of chataot. So using the diagram, that's all we have 2 sin offerings. So we've got 4 birds that came from kinei stuma, so really 2 kinei stuma mixed with 2 chataot. Mishnah says, mechetza kasher, mechetza pasul. If half were offered above and half were offered below, then half would be valid and half would be invalid. So if you have a look at the diagram, once again, that is because in the worst situation, all the chataot were offered above, making them invalid. That being a case, that means that one of the kinei stuma, one of the birds from the kinei stuma was offered above because half are above, half are below, and the remaining 3 were offered below. In that situation, since only 2 of those birds from the kinei stuma should have been offered below, we have an additional bird that is considered invalid below. So that's why, as you can see, we take the 2 chataot that possibly could have been offered above, and one of the birds from the kinei stuma that was offered below as being invalid, and that is half being invalid, with the remaining birds being considered valid. Mishnah then continues, Chatat shnaim bechova. If the number of sin offerings, chataot, are twice the number of birds that would have come from a kinei stuma, so that's why in that situation we have 4 chataot and 1 ken stuma, so that's 2 birds. Mishnah says, Haminyan shebechova kasher. The number of birds that were equal to the number of birds in the ken stuma, those number of birds are considered valid. Now, why is that so? Let's have a look at the example once again. We have a chatat. Again, the worst situation is if all the chatat were offered above. Well, it can't be all of them, because again, we have a total of 6 birds, half offered above and half offered below. But if 3 of 4 offered above, that means meaning 3 of the 4 sin offerings were offered above, that means they're all considered invalid, as we show in the diagram. Which means that the 1 bird in excess from the 4 was offered below correctly. But that also means that the ken stuma was offered below. And as we explained, since when it comes to a ken stuma, one has to be offered above and one has to be offered below, that means one of those 2 birds is considered invalid. Now, if we count the number of valid birds in this worst case scenario, we have once again only 2 birds that can be considered invalid, and that's the minyan shebechova. That's the number of birds from our ken stuma that is considered kasher, that is considered valid. So the Mishnah continues, V'chen olah nit arva bechova in kasher ela minyan olot shebechova. So the Mishnah now repeats itself using the example with olot. So it begins by bringing the principle we learned in the first perek, but then it explains that principle is not true in all situations. In other words, not the minyan olot shebechova, because in some situations, as we learned, if it's chova shnaim ba'olah, if the number of birds in the kinei stuma is twice the number of olot in the mixture, then we say, as we explained before, the mechetza kasher, mechetza pasul, that half are valid and half are invalid. And if, however, we say that the olot, the number of olot, is twice the number of birds in the ken stuma, so for example, 4 olot and 2 birds in total from a single ken stuma, then we say haminyan shebechova, meaning number of birds that from the ken stuma, in that situation it would be 2, would be considered, at most we can assume are considered kasher. And those are the Mishnah today. And that last Mishnah was actually according, as we said, according to Rabbin and Rosh, and that is one of 6 different Perushim that we bring in the Sefer. So if you see the Sefer for more information.